Hi there, and welcome back to Easy Peasy English, the podcast where we make learning English simple, fun, and focused on what really matters, your confidence and communication. I'm Christ, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Whether you're walking to work, washing the dishes, or just taking a quiet moment for yourself, thank you for choosing to spend this time with me. Today, we're talking about something that many learners forget, or even feel ashamed about, speaking slowly. Have you ever listened to a native speaker and thought, wow, they speak so fast. I'll never be able to do that? Or maybe you've tried to speak English, but someone looked confused or impatient, and it made you want to give up. Maybe you've told yourself, my English is too slow. I sound stupid. But let me tell you something important, speed doesn't equal intelligence. Clarity is what counts. Speaking slowly doesn't mean you're weak or unsure. In fact, it can be a sign of strength. It means you're thinking carefully. You're choosing your words. You're making sure you're understood. That's communication. That's connection. And that's powerful. So today, we're going to challenge the idea that you need to speak fast to sound fluent. Because fluency isn't about rushing, it's about expressing yourself in a way that feels real, calm, and confident. If you've ever felt pressure to keep up, to speak faster, or to hide your pauses, this episode is for you. Take a deep breath. Relax your shoulders. You're not in a race. Let's dive in, slowly, clearly, and with confidence. There's a strange belief that many English learners carry: if you don't speak fast, you're not fluent. That somehow, speed equals confidence, speed equals intelligence, speed equals success. But that belief is not only false, it's dangerous. It pressures people to rush through their words, to avoid silence, to force themselves into patterns that don't feel natural. And the result? More stress. More mistakes. More fear. Instead of focusing on what you want to say, you start worrying about how fast you can say it. But let me ask you something, when someone speaks clearly and slowly, do you think they sound less smart? Less capable? Probably not. In fact, think of the most powerful speakers, politicians, TED Talk presenters, teachers, even your favorite YouTubers. Most of them speak at a steady, measured pace. They pause. They breathe. They give space to their words. And because of that, their message is stronger. Their confidence doesn't come from speed, it comes from presence. Now let's flip that question. Imagine someone speaking English very quickly, but you can't understand them. The words are flying, but they don't make sense. Would you say that person is a good communicator? Probably not. Because speaking fast doesn't help if your message gets lost. Communication isn't about speed, it's about clarity. And clarity often lives in the pauses, in the breath, in the slower rhythm that gives your listener time to catch up. I know, though, that speaking slowly can feel uncomfortable. It can make you feel exposed. When you pause between words or take time to think, you might worry that people are judging you. That they think you're unsure or unprepared. But that's just your inner fear talking. Most people, especially those who care, will appreciate your effort. They're not counting your pauses. They're listening to your words. And if your words are spoken with care, they'll land more deeply. Think about children when they first learn to speak. They say one word at a time. I want juice. And we don't rush them. We celebrate every word. We smile, we encourage them, we wait. Why? Because we understand they're learning. We give them space to grow. But as adults, we rarely give ourselves that same kindness. We expect perfection right away. We criticize ourselves for being too slow. But slow is not a flaw. It's a phase. It's part of learning. And more than that, it's completely okay. When you speak slowly, something beautiful happens, you have time to choose better words. You catch your grammar before it slips. You breathe. You stop translating everything in your head. You stop panicking. Your brain has space to think. And the person you're speaking to has space to understand. A conversation becomes a rhythm, not a race. It becomes two people exchanging thoughts, not competing for speed. Let me share something personal. I once had a conversation with a man from Japan who had been learning English for over 10 years. He told me he avoided speaking because people told him he was too slow. He felt embarrassed. So, he stopped practicing. But when we finally sat down and talked, slowly, without pressure, he opened up. And I could see how much he had inside him. His thoughts were deep. His vocabulary was strong. His ideas were clear. He just needed time to let them out. After that conversation, he said something I'll never forget. I realized I don't need to speak fast to be heard. I just need to believe my words matter. And that's exactly the point. Your words do matter. Even if they come out slowly. Even if you pause a lot. Even if you need to repeat yourself. Speaking is not a performance. It's a connection. And real connection comes from authenticity, not speed. When you give yourself permission to speak slowly, you're also giving yourself permission to speak more confidently. To speak more thoughtfully. To speak more you. You're not copying someone else's rhythm. You're finding your own. There's also this little voice that lives in many learners' heads, a voice that says, if I don't speak quickly, people will think I'm not fluent. But fluency doesn't always mean speed. Fluency means flow. It means being able to express your thoughts without too much interruption or hesitation, and that can happen even when you speak slowly. In fact, some of the most fluent speakers I've met were slow talkers. They weren't rushing, but they were smooth. Calm. Comfortable. And that comfort made others feel at ease too. The truth is, when you slow down, your brain has time to work with you, not against you. You give your memory a moment to catch up. You give your tongue a chance to shape the sounds. You create space to feel confident, not frantic. And over time, this slower rhythm becomes your strength. You start noticing that your words come out more naturally. Your sentences become longer. You're not stuck anymore. You're steady. It's like learning to ride a bike. At first, you go slowly so you don't fall. And once your balance improves, speed becomes easier, but it never replaces control. And let's talk about how speaking slowly actually helps other people too. When you rush, you might think you sound smarter, but it often makes it harder for your listener to understand you. Especially if they're not native English speakers either. But when you speak slowly, you're being kind, not just to yourself, but to your listener. You're helping them understand you. You're inviting them into the conversation, rather than pushing them to catch up. And that's a real sign of a confident speaker, someone who cares about being understood more than being fast. Now, I know that sometimes the pressure to speak quickly doesn't come from inside, it comes from outside. Maybe you've spoken with people who seem impatient. Maybe someone laughed when you paused or struggled. That can hurt. But let me remind you of something powerful, you are not responsible for their impatience, you're responsible for your growth. You're responsible for your courage. And your courage includes speaking at your own pace, even when others don't understand how brave that is. In fact, I'd argue that speaking slowly, while still showing up and using your voice, takes more courage than rushing. You're being intentional. You're choosing presence over pressure. And that's a beautiful thing. So if you've ever felt ashamed of your pace, I want you to release that shame right now. It has no place in your learning journey. Another beautiful benefit of slowing down. It helps you listen better too. When you're not racing to reply, you can actually absorb what others are saying. You understand more. You ask better questions. You engage more deeply. And language becomes a real exchange, not just a performance. It becomes about connection, and isn't that the whole point? I once met a woman from Colombia who had been studying English for 2 years. She told me, "I speak slowly because I want to respect the language." That struck me. Because most people feel ashamed of speaking slowly, but she felt proud. To her, speaking slowly meant she was giving the language the care it deserved. And honestly, that mindset changed the way I thought about it too. Because it wasn't about being perfect, it was about being intentional. Being present. Being respectful to her own learning. And here's the twist, once she gave herself that permission, she started improving faster. Why? Because she wasn't rushing. She was absorbing. She was listening. She was thinking. Her sentences got smoother, her vocabulary grew, and her confidence soared. Not because she sped up, but because she stopped trying to. So many learners try to force fluency. But fluency is not something you can force, it's something that grows. And like anything that grows, it needs time. Patience. Care. Imagine planting a seed. You don't yell at it to grow faster. You water it, give it sunlight, and trust the process. Language is the same. And when you slow down, you're giving your learning space to breathe. Some learners worry that if they slow down, they'll sound less intelligent. But think about the people you admire when they speak, in your language or in English. Are they always the fastest speakers? Probably not. In fact, many great communicators, politicians, teachers, leaders, speak with clarity, not speed. They choose their words. They pause. They give meaning to each sentence. And that's what makes people listen. Not how quickly they can say something, but how clearly it's said. Slowing down allows you to be more intentional with your words. You're no longer just trying to survive a conversation, you're shaping it. You're thinking about the meaning behind what you say. And that changes everything. It's no longer just about getting it right. It becomes about getting it across. That shift in mindset turns English into a tool for expression, not a test of memory. It gives you power. And that power grows every time you speak, pause, breathe, and continue, at your own pace. And let's not forget, speaking slowly is also an act of self-respect. You're telling yourself, "I deserve the time to express my thoughts." You're not apologizing for needing a moment. You're not shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. You're standing tall in your process. You're letting your voice come through, fully and clearly. That's not weakness, that's strength. It's easy to think that the goal is to sound like a native speaker. But many native speakers, especially in public speaking or storytelling, speak slowly on purpose. Why? Because they understand the value of rhythm. They know that language has a musical quality, and that pauses, silence, and pacing all play a role in making a message powerful. So when you speak slowly, you're not behind, you're actually using a technique that skilled speakers have used for centuries. Slowing down also helps you remember more of what you've learned. When you rush, your brain panics. It tries to pull too much information too quickly. But when you speak slowly, you give yourself time to recall the right word. And even if you forget it, you're calm enough to describe it in a different way. That's a skill too, and one that fluent speakers use all the time. Because let's be honest, even native speakers forget words. The difference is, they don't stop talking, they just find another way to say it. Think of speaking slowly as building a strong foundation. Every sentence you say becomes more solid, more rooted. You're not throwing words into the air hoping they land in the right order, you're placing them carefully, with intention. And when you do that, your listener feels it. They don't just hear your words, they understand you. They feel connected to you. And that connection is the heart of language. I've met learners who told me they felt stupid because they couldn't speak quickly. And it broke my heart. Because what they didn't realize is that their pace wasn't a problem, their perception was. They had been told, directly or indirectly, that fast equals smart. But that's a lie. Fast is not always better. Fast can be careless. Fast can be stressful. Fast can be confusing. Slow can be thoughtful. Slow can be powerful. Slow can be real. So if you're someone who speaks slowly, or needs to, please know this: you're not behind. You're not broken. You're not less than. You are thoughtful. You are building something strong. You are learning in a way that lasts. And most importantly, you are communicating. That's what matters. Not how fast the words come out, but what they carry when they do. Another thing we often forget is that listening becomes easier when someone speaks slowly. Think about the times you've tried to understand a fast speaker, even in your native language. You probably missed words, felt stressed, and had to guess what they were saying. Now imagine what it's like for someone listening to a second language speaker going too fast. It's even harder. By slowing down, you're helping the other person, too. You're making space for real understanding, not just noise. And that's a beautiful thing, because communication is not a solo performance. It's a shared experience. When you speak slowly, you're not only being kind to yourself, you're being kind to your listener. You're saying, I want us to understand each other. You're creating a bridge, not a race. You're choosing connection over speed. I remember a student of mine from Thailand. She was incredibly smart, thoughtful, patient, kind. But when she spoke English, she tried to rush. She believed that speaking fast would make people respect her more. The problem was, her words came out jumbled. She was frustrated. People often asked her to repeat herself. And that made her feel embarrassed. One day, I told her, try slowing down. Just try it for one conversation. And she did. She paused. She breathed. She let each sentence come out like stepping stones. And guess what? People understood her. They smiled. They nodded. The conversation flowed. That day changed her entire mindset. She told me, for the first time, I felt like I was actually communicating, not just chasing words. That's the shift I want you to feel. Not just speaking for the sake of speaking, but speaking to connect. Speaking to share. Speaking in a way that makes you feel calm, grounded, and true to yourself. That's what builds long-term confidence. Not tricks. Not fancy techniques. Just honest, clear communication at your own pace. There's also something magical that happens when you allow yourself to speak slowly. You hear your own voice. Not just the sound of it, but the meaning behind it. You hear your intention. You notice what you care about. You recognize your progress. And slowly, your relationship with English changes. It stops being something you're trying to get through. It becomes something you own, something that's part of you. And yes, this takes courage. Especially when you're nervous. Especially when your heart is racing and you're worried about making mistakes. But courage doesn't mean the fear disappears. It means you move forward with the fear, slowly, steadily, and bravely. So if you find yourself hesitating before speaking, if your brain is full of words but your mouth freezes, remember this: it's okay to pause. It's okay to take your time. You're not being judged. You're learning. And learning is allowed to be messy. It's allowed to be slow. It's allowed to feel awkward. Because slow speech is not a weakness. It's a skill. It's a way of saying, I'm here. I have something to say. And I'm going to say it, clearly, thoughtfully, and at my own pace. And when you speak like that, you give permission to others to do the same. You become someone who makes space. Someone who listens deeply. Someone who values meaning over performance. And that, my friend, is the kind of speaker the world needs more of. And as you keep practicing this slower, more intentional way of speaking, something else starts to happen. You begin to feel a little more in control. The panic that used to rise when someone asked you a question. It softens. The pressure to perform every time you open your mouth. It eases. Because now, instead of rushing to prove something, you're speaking to share something. That subtle change can shift your whole experience of learning English. This also helps with memory and word recall. You know those moments when you're trying to speak fast, and suddenly your mind just goes blank? That's not because you don't know enough. It's because speed puts your brain under pressure. It makes it harder to find the words you already know. But when you slow down, you give yourself time to think. You allow the words to come. You give your brain and mouth space to work together, instead of fighting each other. And suddenly, speaking becomes less about survival, and more about expression. And that's what language is really for, right? Expression, not perfection. Not speed. Not checking boxes. But expressing yourself. Sharing your feelings. Asking questions. Telling your story. Being you, in English. When we accept that, we stop comparing ourselves to fast-talking YouTubers or native speakers who've been using English since childhood. We realize that our voice matters just as much, even if it's a little slower. Even if it sounds different. Even if we need time to find the right words. I want you to imagine two people. One speaks quickly, using big words, jumping from idea to idea, but you only understand half of what they say. The other speaks slowly, clearly, and simply. Maybe their grammar isn't perfect. Maybe they pause a lot. But you understand them. You connect with them. You feel comfortable around them. Now ask yourself, which speaker do you want to be? There's no right or wrong answer, but for many of us, connection is more powerful than speed. Clarity is more useful than complexity. And calm is more memorable than chaos. When you slow down, you also learn to listen better, not just to others, but to yourself. You start noticing your habits. The words you repeat. The patterns you use. The sounds that feel difficult. And from there, you can grow with intention. You can work on specific things, not because you hate your accent or want to sound native, but because you're curious. Because you enjoy discovering how your voice works in this new language. This curiosity is what keeps learning joyful. And here's the beautiful part, when you speak slowly, you're building a skill that benefits you for life, not just in English, but in any language, in any conversation, in any place where communication matters. You're learning to be present. You're learning to breathe. You're learning to express yourself with care. So no matter where you are on your English journey, beginner, intermediate, or advanced, I hope you remember this. You don't have to speak quickly to be respected. You don't have to sound like someone else to be understood. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to speak. Slowly. Clearly. With heart. And as you grow more comfortable speaking slowly, you might notice something even deeper beginning to shift, not just in how you use English, but in how you feel about yourself as a speaker. You begin to own your voice. You begin to understand that your words matter, not because they're delivered quickly or perfectly, but because they carry you. Your ideas, your feelings, your perspective. This realization can be incredibly empowering, especially if you've ever felt like your English wasn't good enough. When you speak slowly, you're not hiding behind speed or fancy vocabulary. You're being intentional. You're letting every word land. You're showing up exactly as you are, and that's powerful. Because confidence doesn't come from speed. It comes from knowing that what you're saying matters, even if it takes time to say it. Slowing down also helps with emotional regulation. You might not think of that when learning a language, but emotions play a huge role in how we speak. When we're nervous, we speed up. When we feel unsure, we rush through sentences just to get them over with. But when you take your time, you send a signal to your brain and body, *, I'm safe. I'm okay. I'm in control, *, that changes everything. And it's not just about feeling calm, it's about building real, lasting communication habits. Think about public speakers, teachers, or storytellers who really hold your attention. They're not rushing. They're not trying to impress you with how fast they can speak. They're grounding themselves in the moment. They're letting their words breathe. They're making space for connection. You can do the same, no matter your level of English. And remember, speaking slowly doesn't mean speaking less. In fact, when you're not worried about rushing or getting it over with, you might find yourself saying more. You start adding little details. You take the time to describe what you mean. You feel less pressure to be right, and more freedom to be real. That's where true fluency begins, not with perfect grammar or fast speech, but with genuine communication. And yes, some people might still interrupt you. Some people might still finish your sentences. But over time, as your confidence grows, you'll find ways to hold your space. To say, "Let me finish," or "Give me a second." And when you do that, you're not just practicing English, you're practicing self-respect. Slowing down is a way of showing that you value yourself. That your ideas are worth waiting for. That you don't have to rush to be worthy of being heard. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation, whether it's with a friend, a teacher, a stranger, or even with yourself in the mirror, try this simple shift. Take a breath. Speak slowly. Let your words unfold one by one. It might feel strange at first, especially if you're used to rushing. But over time, it will feel natural. And more importantly, it will feel true. Because speaking slowly isn't about moving backward, it's about moving with intention. With clarity. With presence. The beautiful thing about slowing down is that it gives your mind time to catch up with your heart. Often, we think we need to react fast, speak fast, respond fast, as if the world will move on without us if we pause. But the truth is, when you slow down, you're actually allowing yourself to be more present, not less. You notice things you didn't see before, like how someone reacts to your words, or how your own voice sounds more confident when you're not rushing. You also begin to enjoy the conversation more. You're not just surviving the moment, you're in the moment. You hear yourself more clearly. You understand the other person more deeply. It becomes a true exchange, not a race. And something even more powerful happens, your brain starts learning faster. Yes, that might sound strange, but it's true. When you speak slowly, you give yourself time to process vocabulary, recall grammar structures, and fix mistakes gently as you go. You're not just blurting things out and hoping they make sense, you're building language with care, like laying bricks in a strong wall. And that kind of learning, it sticks. So even though it might feel awkward at first, even though part of you might want to speed things up so it's over quicker, remember this: every slow, thoughtful sentence is helping you grow. Every pause is a gift to yourself. Every word, spoken with care, is a step toward fluency. You don't have to sound like anyone else. You don't have to be fast. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you, present, real, and brave enough to keep going. Because at the end of the day, fluency isn't measured by how fast you speak, it's measured by how freely you can share your ideas. And when you learn to slow down and trust yourself, that freedom becomes yours. So the next time you're speaking English, whether it's with a friend, a teacher, or even just to yourself, try slowing down. Take a breath. Give your words space to come out. You might be surprised at how much more clearly you express yourself, and how much more confident you feel. Remember, speaking slowly isn't a weakness. It's a strength. It shows self-awareness. It shows intention. And most importantly, it helps you enjoy the conversation, instead of just trying to get through it. Thanks so much for spending this time with me today. I hope this episode gave you something to think about, and more importantly, something to practice. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to follow or subscribe to Easy Peasy English so you never miss an episode. And if this helped you, maybe share it with a friend who needs a little encouragement too. You're doing great. Keep going, At your pace, in your way. Until next time, take care, and remember, your voice deserves to be heard. Speak slowly, but speak. Talk to you soon.